Alright, what's up guys? In this video I'm going to pick up some calculus here. We're going to be talking about summation notation. So as to determine the following value of the summation or determine the value of the following summation. So we're given the summation here, I is equal to 1 to 90. We got 3 minus 2i squared. Alright, so this is relatively easy to do, but you do need to be familiar with the properties and formulas that come along with summation notation. So you need to have these on hand, or you need to have them memorized in order to do this, but it's a relatively simple process. So I'm really not going to get into a whole bunch of it, but remember, as with integrals, we can always factor out constants. C can be any number, so you can just take it out, very similar to how we do with integration. Keep in mind that I, which is equal to I sub 0, just basically says that I sub 0 can start from any number that we want it to start from. And you pretty much just have to use the formulas to basically get your answer. However, what I do want to mention before we get started with this is a relatively easy activity, but it will surprise you, or wouldn't, well, depends, but maybe it does surprise you that a lot of students end up getting this question wrong. And the reason for it is because I oftentimes say that sometimes things can be a little bit too easy, and students will move too fast, and they will not be careful with their arithmetic. They won't check their answers. So when you're doing this, it's a relatively simple process, and depending on what the summation is, maybe the numbers won't get too big. In this particular case, the numbers are going to get quite big. So you want to make sure that you're taking your time and you're not rushing through this. All it takes is one negative out of the wrong spot. Maybe you write a positive number when it should have been negative, negative when it should have been positive, and that's all it's going to take for you to get the wrong answer. So please make sure you're doing your arithmetic correctly and taking your time. Also, same thing goes for the calculator, because the numbers are going to get quite big in this particular activity. You want to make sure that you're plugging things into the calculator correctly. A calculator is going to be right, but that is given that you plug it in there correctly. Now, a good example of that would be, let's say, -1 squared. Well, I know if I square a negative number, I get a positive number. And I'm certainly not going to assault you guys' intelligence. I know you guys know that already. But the problem is, just for a general idea here, if you put -1 squared in the calculator without putting parentheses around the negative number, look what the calculator gives you. It gives you -1. And it's the same thing for a lot of other operations too that come on the calculator. So yes, the calculator be right, but that's given that you plug everything in there correctly. So please, if anything, any advice I can give you about this particular activity, you need to take your time. The numbers are going to get big, and I guarantee you, you're going to run into problems if you're trying to rush through this. And I'm only telling you that because I've made that mistake in the past myself. Okay, so now that I'm done giving you the math lecture that I hate having to give, but it's very important, we can go ahead and get started with it. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to expand out what we have. So let's begin by expanding out the 3 minus 2i squared. Now remember, 3 minus 2i squared, that's just 3 minus 2i times 3 minus 2i. Hopefully you guys remember how to FOIL from algebra. And this is just going to give us 9 minus 12i plus 4i squared. And then we're just going to use the properties of summation and our summation formulas to find the value of this summation. So we'll need to use the sum and difference rule. And if we go up here, so basically we have our summation, AI plus or minus BI. We can break it up kind of like that. Very similar to what we do with integrals. And so that's what we're going to do in this case. So now what we have is we have our summation from I is equal to 1 to 90, and we'll have 4i squared minus 12i plus 9, or if you want to, you can write it this way, to 90, and you could just write it this way, 9 minus 12i plus 4i squared. Either of those ways is fine. Some students write it that way, some write it that way. That's the only reason why I wanted to bring that up, but either is fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply some of these properties here. So from I is equal to 1 all the way up to 90. I'm going to break this up. So we're going to have 9 minus. We get our summation from I is equal to 1 to 90. Then we'll have 12i. And all I'm doing here is using the properties of the summation, or the formulas per se, to break this up. Because this is obviously how we're going to go about getting our answer. Okay. So when we go up to our properties here, we already know what we're going to have. Okay. So if we go up to our properties, notice here that we have our constant again, which can be pulled out, which in this case would just be the 9, but maybe don't necessarily need to pull it out at this particular moment. But if we go back to using the sum and difference rule, all we have to do is we take our 9, and basically it says that when we have our constant, C, it's just going to be C multiplied by N. Now you just have to identify what the N is. Our N here is 90. So that means this is going to be 9 times 90. And then we go minus 12. And if we go back to the properties, it tells us if I have I, that's just going to be N times N plus 1 all over 2. So this is going to be minus 12. This will be 90 times 90 plus 1, all divided by 2. And I'm going to have to go down a little bit because I'm not going to have enough room. And then if I imagine myself pulling the 4 out, it's a constant, that'll leave me with I squared on the inside. And notice here it says that if I got I squared on the inside here, this would be equal to N times N plus 1 times 2N plus 1 all over 6. So what we have to do is stick in 90 for every place we see an N, and do it from there. So as you can see, it's relatively simple. It's just kind of basically a plug and chug, but again, if you are not careful, you will easily get this wrong. And again, I'm only stating that because I've made that mistake. And any words of advice I try to give you guys about mistakes in math are mistakes that I've made and that have cost me a lot of points. So I try to share some words of wisdom, so to speak, with you guys as well, so you can avoid losing points. Because some professors are just flat out, I don't want to say villains, because that's not necessarily the case. They're just doing their job, but some of them have no apathy or whatever, or empathy per se, and you make a small little mistake and they'll just take a whole bunch of points. So just don't give them that opportunity. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our calculator and we're going to actually do this. So it's going to be from I is equal to 1 all the way up to 90. And again, we got 3 minus 2I quantity squared. All right, so now we take our calculator and we're going to do it. So for the first part, we got 9 times 90. 9 times 90 gives me 810. All I'm doing is taking care of the arithmetic that we're doing down here. Then if I go over here, the first thing I'm going to do is deal with the parentheses. So we got 90 and, we got 90 times 91, okay, because this is what we have here. Then when you divide all of that by 2, we can multiply by 12. And you can even plug it into your calculator just like that and it'll do it for you. And that's basically what I'm doing. And the numbers are going to get quite big, so don't be discouraged. Looks like we'll get, and this is going to be minus, by the way. So it looks like we'll get 49,140. And then we need to move on to the last part. So we got 4, and we're going to multiply that by 90, multiplied by 91. Then 2 times 9, that's 180. So we add 181. So we multiply that by 181. Excuse me. And then we'll divide that by 6. And if we do that, we get 988,260. So you get, this is going to be plus, of course, 988,260. Now, we just plug all of this stuff into the calculator, and whatever we get out will be the summation, will be the value of the summation. And that'll be our answer. So let's go ahead and write our final answer down after that. So as you can see, relatively simple activity, but very easy. Very, very easy here to make a mistake. And by the way, you can do these on your own. You can go in your calc textbook, and they got plenty of them in there for you to kind of try and play around with these. All right, so let's go ahead and plug everything in there. Make sure you're plugging everything in the calculator correctly, and we'll see what we get. So it looks like we get 9,834,270. Let me make sure that's right and put it back in there one more time. Gotta be extremely careful just to check behind myself, just to make sure. No, I'm sorry. We get 90. Yeah, we get 9,399,000. Yeah, we get 939,930 would actually be our answer. That's your answer. And this is what I got on my calculator. And notice how when I did it the first time, I got a number, but in an effort to make sure that I wasn't wrong on that, I plugged it in again just to make sure. And I wound up with that. Now you can check me on that, but that should be correct. So my word of advice, once you get to the final answer, since you're dealing with a bunch of big numbers, plug it in there at least twice to make sure that you get the same answer. If you get the same answer, you more than likely plugged it in there correctly. If you didn't, then you need to go back a little slower and make sure that you plugged it in there correctly. Now, when I plugged it in the first time, as you can see, I got an entirely different answer than what we got when I did it the second time. And that's exactly why I did it twice. And I'm actually glad in a way that I made that mistake, because I want you guys to see how easily you can make a mistake like that if you're not being careful. So I'm actually glad I made that mistake, because that proves my point that with these numbers being as big as they are and you not plugging in the calculator correctly, you can easily get it wrong. Okay, so that's going to be it for this activity. Let me know if you got any questions, and I will see y'all next time.